Alrighty, welcome everybody to the Generation Z podcast, episode 4. Today I'm joined with my good friend Matt, and we are going to be talking about abortion. Now, you might think if you know us at all personally, or if you know that this is, a conservative, for the most part, we lean pretty conservative on the podcast. You'd probably think, well, there's going to be a lot of agreeing. However, that is not the case because there is a little bit of liberal in me. And so recently, I've been kind of rethinking my stance on abortion away from super pro life and more towards moderately. I'm still moderately pro life, but um, yes. So
Yeah, and I and
that's what
I
we're going to be talking about.
and I definitely lean towards the very pro-life side, very conservative. Only time I believe abortion is acceptable is when it puts the mother's life in danger in early steps of the pregnancy. So why don't you give the times where you think it's acceptable? Because I just gave the times I did. So when do you think it's acceptable?
Yeah. So I think late term abortions are terrible. I think midterm abortions are terrible. Um, and it's so hard. Like, where do you draw the line? But I think if it's in like the first 2 to 3 weeks, I think that I would be okay with there being some exceptions there.
Okay, would you care to explain why you think there's exceptions there?
Yes, I just think my exception's there because I think at that point it is in such early stages of development. I'll just go right and say it. I do not believe uh human valuable human life starts at conception.
But you
Right.
you are you are you acknowledging that it is a human life at conception, or just that it's not valuable until a certain point?
Well, it is living. All our cells in our body are living, but I do not think it necessarily has the not necessarily soul, but the components of what makes a human on day one. Not even day one, like minute one. Like that's where I disagree with the pro-life thing. Is the pro-life movement is that as soon as sperm meets eggs, it has just as much value as a fully living person. Mm, I don't know. I don't necessarily buy that.
You don't necessarily buy that at the moment of conception. It's just as valuable as someone who is, I guess, outside of the
Me or
womb.
you?
Me or you?
Me or
Okay.
you? No,
And
I do not believe it has the same amount of value. I believe it has some value.
so I guess in a way, I agree with you because I don't think it has as much value in the sense that that's why I think it's acceptable if it puts the mother's life in danger. I think she's already has like an established being, and that's why I think she takes precedence over the baby. But
Well,
I still think it's the baby has enough value that if for any other reason it wouldn't be justifiable.
as soon as it's conceived.
As soon as it's conceived, that's why I only support the mother only when the mother's life is in danger. No other reasons, no other exceptions, and that's for several different reasons we can talk about later.
All
But
right, so you would be against like Plan B, like morning after pills,
yeah.
things like that,
Mhm.
because you think that. So should those also be illegal?
Are you talking about
It's the
Plan B?
same thing as
Yeah, no,
yeah, Plan B
I do.
pills.
I disagree with the premise of Plan B.
Well, it's one thing to disagree with it. It's another thing to think it should be illegal.
Well, I think it should be illegal. Yes, then yes.
Okay, okay. I'm just clarifying. All right. Um, yeah. So, for what reason do you think that life begins at conception,
Why do I? Well, I think there's a lot of
and
like.
that it has value at that point, the same amount of value?
Well, I think it has the potential to develop into a fully functioning sentient being at the point of conception. It becomes like a possibility. Like at that point, it's no
Yes.
longer just a sperm and an egg. It's come together and it's created something completely new.
That is yes. I agree. It has created something new, but the fact that it is human life doesn't necessarily mean that it has the same value as, say, you and I.
I no,
I mean, it's literally like microscopic mush.
I'm not saying, like I said before, I think it has slightly less value, but I think its value is still great enough that it's not worth. And
That you shouldn't be able to terminate the
yeah,
cell growth.
because I don't think there's a valid argument saying it has the same level of value as something that's already established in our world, because it still has precedent over the mother. The mother's life is still above that of the child she's carrying.
So, but at that point, I mean, there's no brain waves. There's not even any foundation for the brain. There's no heartbeat. There's no organs formed. I mean, it's literally a pile of cells when it's that early on.
Yeah, which I think we can both agree, even piles of cells are life. And it's
Yes, but just being life doesn't mean that you have value.
But it also it's the possibility of what it can turn into. I mean, there are plenty of like studies that have shown that it is at conception life. Like if you look at like there are famous doctors who've done hundreds of hours of research and proving that it is life at conception.
On what grounds, or like what foundation do they use to say that it is? Because the whole "it's life at conception" is fairly religious argument, because it's the idea that
didn't we just agree that
we get our souls.
You just agreed with me that it is life at conception. You just don't agree that it has the same value.
It is alive.
It is alive, so therefore you agree with me that it's a life at conception.
Yeah, but that's not the view. That's not the view of religious people. They don't believe that it's a life in the sense that it's just living. They believe it's a life in the fact that it is just as intrinsically valuable because it has a soul at that point.
Well, I can tell you some studies that have shown that it is a life at conception. Like, would you care to hear those studies? Was that something that would intrigue you?
Yeah, well, naming the source is one thing. I want to know on what grounds is it a life, not just is it living, because whether or not something is living should not define
it's the
the laws.
Because it's the point at which life becomes possible. It's at the point of conception that life it has the opportunity to turn into something new. It's at that point.
Yeah.
That foundation begins. So that's why
I don't disagree that it has the potential. But I mean, okay, have you seen the movie Minority Report?
No.
You have. Oh, okay, so basically, precedent. Oh my God, I can't speak. The whole idea of it is that it's with Tom Cruise, and in the future they have developed a system where they have these beings that can see the future, and they tell this crime investigation branch of the government exactly when someone is going to commit a murder, who it's going to be, and how they're going to do it. They literally can show like a video of them doing it in the future. So then they can arrest the people before it even happens. So basically, they base their conclusions based on the possibility of it happening. And they have their reasons as to why it will have to happen, and there's no way that they're going to rethink through it and not end up committing the murder. It's just going to happen. So, yes, a fetus might have the potential of becoming a human, but that does not mean that it is, at the current state, a human, in the same way that me and you are.
But it is like, what makes a human then? Cool.
That's such a hard question, because I feel like there's spiritual aspects of that. Are you talking physically what makes a human, or like the soul?
What changes that at whatever point you say life begins? What changes so that it's become a human?
Brain waves, heartbeat, organs functioning. I mean, the very bare minimum is where I would draw the line.
So at what point in a pregnancy would you say that's become a human?
Um, my research shows me that around 3 to 4 weeks, the heart begins to
Begins
form
to
and
beat.
beat.
So that begins
And
at
that's around the same time that like the organs start to form,
yeah,
brain
and that
starts to
begins at
form.
21 to 22 days, correct?
Yeah, 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, but like the majority of pregnancies, like people don't even know they're pregnant until at least like a month into the pregnancy. That's when the first symptoms start to begin.
You are correct.
So how would most people know that they are even pregnant up? So if you only support it up to a month, not even a month, three weeks,
Hmm.
how would even people even know that they're pregnant so far without taking like a test and without like having some suspicion?
Yeah, so the reason that most people end up taking a test is because they like miss their period or something, right?
Yep.
Which is typically, um, 2 to 4 weeks, about a month. I'll give you that. It's about a month after you have sex. And I think that there are ways to catch that you are pregnant before a month. I mean, it is possible because there are abortions that are done prior to,
Yeah.
within about a month. So
Mhm.
it is possible. I am agreeing with you, and I think the vast, vast, vast majority of abortion should be illegal. But I think that there needs to be some foundation that makes it a life, and I think that it's fair to say that okay, once it has its major organs and it's no longer just this bundle of cells, but it now has a brain cortex forming. It has the heart starting to beat. It has these organs starting to function. I think
But
before that, there's really no foundation as to why it has moral value other than well, it just does.
well, okay, so all right, so I guess well, I disagree, but because so my logic behind it is if you take any stage of development, even in the womb, developing as a child, all the way up to like natural death, right? If we take that
Yes.
entire timeline, if you at any point prevent whatever like the fetus, a child, like an adult, at any point if you stop their development, you kill them, correct? Like you are terminating their ability to continue forward.
Yes, you are. Yeah,
You are
technically speaking, yeah, like if I kill a kid, I'm preventing his ability
to
to
grow
get
further.
grow older. That is not the moral issue, though. That is not the moral problem with me killing a kid. Is oh now he won't be able to progressively grow. The moral issue when I would kill a kid is you just killed something that has intrinsic value because it is a human.
And I would say we get that value, that intrinsic value, because of our ability to grow as sentient beings and growing in our understanding of things that we can't comprehend, like religion, like just our ability to like continually develop is what makes us human. That's what makes us alive.
I don't think that necessarily is the standard for human life. Everything that's living, even bacteria, progressively can grow, and so I don't think that
But
that is
it
what
is life.
distinguishes human life.
Bacteria is alive. Like that. It's a.
Yes, that doesn't mean it has moral value, though.
I'm not saying it does. I'm saying because it's human, and I can't see how you can argue that something that's at conception it doesn't become human. That's like what it's developing into a human life. It's developing to be that. So it has to be
Yeah,
that.
well, it's developing into that. That does not mean that it is that. I think, and I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head, an analogy that I don't even know if it makes sense or not, but um, a caterpillar is not a butterfly until it goes into its cocoon and hatches and becomes a butterfly.
But we're not butterflies.
No, but it's an analogy comparing the fact that you're agreeing that, okay, well, this is the foundation of what will become human life. That does not mean that it is human life itself, just like a caterpillar is the foundation for which a butterfly will become a butterfly. That does not mean it is a butterfly. That was what I was trying to say. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
I get what you're trying to say, but I think that analogy is like slightly.
well, what's flawed about it? It's the idea that just because something will become something does not mean that that original something is that end product,
But I think
which
it's
was
different.
the whole idea of
I
what you
think
were
it's
saying.
just I think it's a different. I think you have to make a distinction that's like a That's something completely different. We're talking about a butterfly as opposed to a human life.
Well, yes, but both progress and grow. You just define that as your standard for life.
So you think that it isn't a human life because it doesn't have a heartbeat or brain waves. It's a clump of cells, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like we're kind of just saying like the same things over and over again on why we disagree on that.
Well, but how is that incorrect? Like, how is it a human when it doesn't have any organs? It's literally like a couple cells clumped together. You're telling me that has just as much value as me and you?
No.
Because you want to regulate it the same way. You want it to be murder.
Well, in some cases, it already is considered murder.
It is, yes.
In some cases, it already is considered murder.
I agree.
Yeah.
Not when it's, that early on.
Like no,
But
it can be considered murder that early on.
I've read about things. Well, I have read about things where abortion pills have been slipped into, like doctors have given abortion pills
Well, I'm talking
to
about like
like their
when like
girlfriends.
no when like
Yeah, no, no, no.
yeah
And they're charged with murder of
yeah.
the fetus, but I don't know when specifically how old the fetus was at that point.
Well, I know there's been cases like where like in serious car crashes where fetuses have been killed because that can seriously damage and kill the fetus. I know that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it can be a double not homicide, but a double manslaughter.
yeah, double manslaughter.
Yeah. No, I'm aware of that. However, I don't know if that applies. I don't know how those laws apply to the babies based on how old they are. I just haven't done it, and I don't think either of us do.
Yeah, I guess neither of us do. I do know there's some. I have heard of some early cases of like people being charged with double manslaughter at like really early stages, but I don't know how those cases turned out. Okay, but we can at least agree that a bill like the heartbeat bill should be passed, right? Can we agree on the premise that
Absolutely.
we need to set a point at which a life is a life? At the very least, we need to make that abundantly clear.
Yes, and federally mandated. This should not be a state's issue.
I agree.
There needs to be a federal ban on abortion after
Yeah, I
a
don't think.
specific amount of time, wherever you want to draw the line.
Yeah, because it should not be a state issue because otherwise there'd be too many.
Yeah.
You could just go to another state.
Murder is not a state issue,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
this wouldn't be either. But that's the thing. If people watching are saying, well, then why would you be okay with it? I don't think you're murdering a human life when it's 2 weeks into the pregnancy and nothing has been happening. I mean, I'm reading something that Ben Shapiro uses, Steven Crowder uses. This is from the Daily Wire, and literally nothing significant happens. Their first thing is at day 22, the heart begins to beat, which is when I agree it should be illegal at that point.
Okay, so
literally the only thing they say is unique human life begins. Okay, in what sense? And they don't say anything. They just say, oh well, the embryo begins to form.
It does. Okay, yeah.
Yes, the cells do clump together and begin to form.
Do you agree with the idea that it should not? I'm just trying to get a better idea of where you stand. Do you agree with me in the idea that it would not be acceptable under cases of incest or rape?
I would say the same standard. I would apply the same standard to everything except mother's life being endangered. So rape, I don't think it should be legal just because of the way. Well, I theoretically I do think it should be legal, but then the argument you presented me.
So we also disagree on that because for that I agree. The only argument that you can make besides the legal argument is that a morality argument, like that.
Right.
Even though of the horrible, because everyone can agree that rape's like a super bad circumstance.
Here, hold on. Before we go, let's explain to anyone watching what I meant by having abortions illegal for rape victims
Yeah,
wouldn't be
exactly.
feasible. So you would need to prove that you were raped, and by the time you went through a court trial and got the guilty or innocent, or proved that you were or were not raped, the baby would be so far along or born already that it would already be illegal to kill the
Yeah.
child. So it
So
just wouldn't
that's
be feasible.
that's the argument that I usually make, because it's
Well, let's say theoretically.
theoretically we had a perfect justice system that didn't infringe on the Fourth Amendment and could solve crimes in a day.
No, no, no. I'm saying theoretically,
Yeah.
like, let's say you could figure. Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you could figure it out, do you think that it should be legal for
I
rape?
would still say no, and I never make this argument because it's a moral argument as opposed to like the legal argument, which is a lot easier to make. But I
Yeah,
think that it's not the baby, or as you might call it, the embryos. Like it isn't their fault. The circumstance is awful, but I don't think it's their fault, and I don't think they're, because at that point I think it's a life, and I don't think that life has done anything wrong thus far. So I don't think we can.
right. But don't you see, because my big problem with abortion is the whole responsibility
Yeah.
issue, right?
Yeah.
I think as a culture, we are very irresponsible,
I mean,
and
most
so
abortions are like completely avoidable with just proper.
yeah, you're absolutely right. But that's the thing about rape is that it has nothing to do with personal responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, she should have worn protection or he should have worn protection. It's
Yeah. No,
like,
it has nothing
no,
to do with
you
that.
could not do anything about it.
It is not their fault. But and honestly, like the moral argument I make, I sometimes I just like I can't like. For the most part, I agree with it, but that's something that I switch back and forth on a lot because like it really is like just
Yeah.
a terrible circumstance. But we don't live in a perfect world with a perfect justice system, so I don't even think the moral argument has to be made because I think
Yeah.
it's too difficult to prove that someone was raped in the amount of time that would be required for the abortion to still be feasible. It's too difficult.
Yeah. Uh, I agree. It would not be able to. It would not be feasible in the slightest bit. So yeah, that covers that. Incest. I also
It's
think
like the
it's
same
the
thing
same
because
thing should
you'd have to
apply.
prove it. Yeah.
Well, I guess so, but I would just say the same responsibility
Yeah.
argument, and I think it should have the same thing. But um,
No. So how do
yeah.
you think there's any ways that we could work on this responsibility portion? Like, what ways do you think is like the best way to handle this issue?
um, it's a cultural thing, honestly. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the show Friends on Netflix, but as I watch it, I can understand the societal impact, negative societal impact it would have had, because literally they're just having like sex with like all these people all the time and talking about like how great it is.
Yeah.
So and I mean that's in the media everywhere. So when we watched that, I mean, it leads to people being sexually irresponsible, which
Do you think we need to do any
is
like a
surprising.
better job of teaching kids in schools? Do you think we need to have a more comprehensive educate, like explaining like the proper like.
See, I don't. Here's where I don't think that we need to have abstinence teaching. I think we just need to have factual teaching,
I agree,
right?
but I agree, but I also
There's
I think abstinence should be at least like it should be at least mentioned. You know what I'm saying? I don't think it should be the core teaching because it's not gonna just saying that won't prevent people from doing it. But I think it should be at least brought up once.
well, yeah, you could say like ways to prevent pregnancy.
Number one,
Don't have
yeah,
sex is one of them. Tends to be the most effective.
yeah, it does. But I agree that like
Just
that's
generally.
I don't think that's a very useful teaching.
It should just be okay. This is what can happen if you get pregnant. These are ways you can prevent it. There is no guarantee.
Mhm.
This is a way you can prevent it. 100% guarantee.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
That should be the approach. There shouldn't be like a make sure you're doing this way or this way. It should just say this is what helps, this is what doesn't. And that's that.
Okay, so we agree. Okay, wait. Um. Do you see like the comment in the video?
Yeah, that was from a while ago though.
All right. Well, shoot. I'll also show. So just for clarification, because someone's wondering, I am arguing in support of not having any abortions at all, unless it's mother's life in danger, and then Jake is arguing that only time abortion is allowed is mother's life is in danger or 21 days.
Not necessarily 21 days before a heart begins to beat.
Before.
'Cause that's usually around there, but it could happen sooner, it could happen later. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I agree with what you just what your
Yeah.
definition was.
I just It's
Yeah.
not like at day 21 you're banned from having an abortion. It's when the heart begins to beat.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I've heard Ben Shapiro's argument on this, which is what he always does. He asks the pro-choice person debating him, okay, what defines human life? And they'll say some stuff, whether it's when it's sentient, when it comes out of the womb. But when people say when it has a heartbeat, I really don't like the way Ben Shapiro twists or moves the argument in a way where he can then attack that from a position that his opposition isn't really making. So what will happen is someone will say, "Oh, when a heart begins to beat, I think that's when," and he'll say, "Oh, okay, so you think that the standard is the baby needs to have a beating heart. So what if someone heart isn't beating, right, and they need a pacemaker to beat it? Then can we kill them all of a sudden?" And the pro-choicer debating him, usually stupid, is like, I guess not. And then that's that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really bad way of twisting someone's. The same thing is with when brain waves are detectable, and then he'll say, "Oh, so if someone's in a coma and they're not sentient, does that mean we can just kill them?" It's like, really, like that only works in a very few circumstances. But generally speaking, I think the argument that the pro-choicer there is trying to make is when it begins.
Yeah.
Right? The first time the heart starts to beat, not just is the heart beating ever. I mean, no one's making that argument. So I think when pro-lifers make that argument, it's just
Well, I think
disingenuous.
it's a good argument to make people think about what they're saying. Cause sometimes I agree in some situations he uses it wrong, but in some situations, like when people are like the argument where like the brain dead argument, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like it needs to be sentient. But see, that's the liberals' fault. What the liberals should say is when it first gains sentience. Because now Ben Shapiro can't make that argument of, okay, well, what if you're in a coma? Okay, he has already at some point in his life, when he was a fetus, gained sentience. And no one is born unsentient, I don't think. Like, you can't gain sentience after you're born.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have some ability to feel or have some senses prior to birth. So I don't think I think that sentient argument is specifically the fault of the liberal debating him, but other than that, I don't like that argument
Yeah.
for pro-life.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of what we wanted to cover. This has been a shorter podcast, but
Yeah, it might just be a little mini one,
a little mini one. I like that.
Well, that's about 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's still pretty good length. So, if there's anything you want us to talk about, make sure you drop it in the comments because we were racking our brains trying to think of what our next podcast should be on. So, if you have any ideas, please feel free to drop them down below. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you check out all of our other ones. We've discussed some pretty interesting things. Make sure you turn that notification bell ring on so you're notified when we go live. And make sure you drop a like and subscribe. And we appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Adios.